All right. Final point then with him is just simply that for him, there's no apostolic church in reality. There's a invisible Calvinist invisible church that exists amongst all the ones that he calls apostolic. So-called apostolic church has no unified teaching on Christology, the energies, or any of the other crucial doctrines of the first 1,000 years of Christianity. In fact, in his mind, you could go to an Anglican church that doesn't believe in energies and uncreated grace. He could go to a Monophysite church that says something totally different. And you go to an Orthodox church, they're all the church. But there is no such thing as his made-up church. Number two, his position doesn't make any sense if he's going to mock and make fun of energies, when this was his whole point about rejecting the Thomists. The Thomists were arguing that the angel of the Lord has to be a created hologram or a created being, an angel. And so he saw the theophanies. Okay, but you don't have theophanies without the essence energy distinction. He doesn't even know this. And if you come to Orthodoxy, one of the things you have to learn is that it takes many years to get healed from Protestantism and Calvinism. So there's no true church in his position. He has an Nestorian invisible church ecclesiology. There's no consistent, coherent doctrine of theophanies because he says that the energies are something to make fun of, which he doesn't understand is the only way to have theophanies. Well, I can have communion at the Catholic Church and the Orthodox won't give it to me. Well, maybe you need to be catechized and start the process. But that would require humility and abjuration of errors. And so you understand that what's the root issue here? You have to be under authority and you have to go through the process of being healed and have a change in your noetic faculties to be opened up to this new theology, which is only had through the sacraments. And this is why Roman Catholicism doesn't provide this healing. Roman Catholicism doesn't even have a nous doctrine. They don't believe in the heart. There's just the intellect and the body. He doesn't even understand that Roman Catholic dogma, and he thinks this because he's listening to an idiot. He doesn't have to believe this or he can twist this and interpret it in some other way. No, you don't understand that you have to submit to the magisterium. The magisterium is not what you think it is. So they're all going to be Protestants, him and Albrecht, when they go into reading the magisterial texts and say, well, I don't have to accept that. I don't have to do this because I've already been down this road. I've done the Roman Catholic thing. I know how it works. I know all of this Roman Catholic nonsense inside and out. The church regards with esteem the Muslims. They adore the one God. Adoration in Catholic theology, he doesn't even know this, is a term of worship. The one God that lives and subsists in himself, merciful and all-powerful, the creator of heaven and earth. So notice that the very thing that he's argued all these years, that Allah is the devil, Allah is Baal, Allah is Baal, the demon god. Now he's putting himself under the authority, supposedly, of a church that officially and dogmatically teaches that Muslims and Christians adore the same one true God. In fact, Muslims take pains to submit to God in his decrees, just like Abraham did. So Muslims have the faith of Abraham, according to Nostra Aetate 3. He doesn't know the Roman Catholic dogmatic magisterium. He hasn't read Vatican II. He hasn't read the Council of Trent. He hasn't read Denzinger. He doesn't know any of this stuff he talks about. It's not just Nostra Aetate that talks about this relationship. It's also Lumen Gentium 16. So both of these texts are dogmatic, official Vatican II teachings. It's because you can't accept these contradictory positions and not go insane. Roman Catholics, I literally believe they actually go insane the more that they know and understand and are exposed to what the papal teaching and position actually is. And it says here, the plan of salvation also includes those that acknowledge the Creator, the first of whom are the Muslims, who profess to hold the faith of Abraham, and along with us, adore the one and merciful God. Now notice in the Nostra Aetate text, it said that they do submit to God's decree, just like Abraham. Because Roman Catholics say, well, it doesn't say they have it, it says they profess to have it. No, in Roman Catholic theology, adoration is a worship term. So Muslims worship the one true God, And that's all premised on natural theology in the Roman Catholic Church. Roman Catholic Church has dogmatized here, for example, this generic theism of an Old Testament Unitarian God. That's how they came to this conclusion. This is how the papacy has built an Abrahamic faith center in Abu Dhabi, which is already opened, where Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all can gather in terms of human fraternity in Abu Dhabi to honor the one living God, the very thing that Nostra Aetate 3 and Lumen Gentium 16 say. If this doesn't tell you that this church no longer professes the Trinitarian theology of the first 1,000 years of Christianity and the Old and New Testaments, there's really nothing else that would convince you of the problem in Rome. And it's not just, well, that doesn't count, it's not dogma. No, actually, Vatican II is dogma. Do you know that any Catholic church that you go to in the world, you are expected to believe Vatican II? There's no Roman Catholic churches that will tell you Vatican II is optional. In fact, the Catholic Catechism, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, is filled with citations from Vatican II. Why would that be optional? On what basis is it optional? It's not optional. You don't have an option to believe it or not. In fact, there are 5 places in Catholic dogma that tell you not only do you have to believe the ex cathedra statements, you also have to believe all the things that are normative ordinary teaching in the church. And even if you think it's wrong, even if it's not, quote, infallible, you're supposed to submit to it with docility. That's canon law in the Roman Catholic Church. But this is exactly why these people's pope, including Sam Shamoun's new spiritual leader, goes and prays towards Mecca in the mosques. And not just crazy Frank, Benedict XVI, the so-called trad, did the exact same thing. So imagine trying to convince people for however many decades of how bad Islam is, and then you're going into an entity whose infallible divine charism head goes and prays in mosque towards Mecca and builds giant Abu Dhabi multi-faith centers based around the premise that Muslims, Jews, and Christians all worship the same generic God. There's a reason why the Catholic apologists suck at defending the Trinity. It's not just because of their ignorance. It's actually because they're being consistent with your dogma. There's nobody in the first 1,000 years of Christianity that would do anything like this. And in fact, the ancient canons say you cannot pray in the synagogues or in the heterodox churches so-called. Now, beyond that, the ancient canons themselves from every 7 ecumenical councils literally contains canons that contradict Vatican I. The document on human fraternity, this is the document that Francis drew up that is the basis for the Abu Dhabi Multi-Faith Center. The entire document is nothing but social justice warrior, one world religion nonsense. This is what these people are signing on for. This is what the thing that Francis runs, which is already essentially put into law, church law. So there's a spiritual delusion that's at work. That's the root of this problem, you see. It's not an intellectual issue. And in fact, the Vatican itself, in their documents, when it comes to ecumenism, their documents themselves admit the very thing that the Orthodox have said the entire time. This is the Francis-approved Chieti document, and it admits right there that the Bishop of Rome did not exercise canonical authority over the churches of the East in the first millennium. There you go. That means that Vatican I's claims are not true. Beyond that, there was the new ecumenist doctrine, known as the Alexandria document on synodality and primacy. This admission also means that Vatican I is false. But I'm going to say that you should go and read Vatican I in its entirety at papalencyclicals.net, because you're going to see a lot of things that most Roman Catholics don't tell you. So just like when these people talk about the Muslims and the evangelicals who convert to Islam, and then they point out that, oh, you didn't know about the Sahih Bukhari. You didn't know about the hadiths you got to believe. Or you were just told that Islam is simple. You didn't know you had to believe all this other stuff. Well, guess what? You didn't know that you had to believe unum sanctum, did you? You didn't know that you had to go into canon law in the Roman Catholic Church, which is binding on you as a lay person. Let's see what Roman Catholic canon law says about lay people. Although in assent of faith, this is the Vatican II canon law. Although in assent of faith, a religious submission of intellect and will must be given to a doctrine which the Supreme Pontiff or the College of Bishops declares concerning faith or morals when they exercise the magisterium, even if they do not proclaim it a definitive act. So although it's not an assent of faith in the sense of dogma, in other words, they're saying that because the Pope might teach something that is wrong in non-magisterial cases. This is called the ordinary teaching in Catholicism. Okay, do I have to submit to the ordinary teaching in Roman Catholic canon law? A religious submission of intellect and will must be given to the doctrines that the Supreme Pontiff or the College of Bishops teach, even if they do not declare it a definitive act. This destroys the lie that they all tell each other, that they only have to believe the ex cathedra statements. And I have a whole talk on this showing that that's not true. There's 5 statements in Catholic theology and dogma that tell you that you can't just believe the ex cathedra statements. You don't get to handwave Vatican II. And just like when you call out the Muslims, oh, it's not just Quran, baby. You also got to believe all of this other hadith stuff. Oh, it's not just popes ex cathedra, baby. You also got to believe all this papal nonsense, baby. Let's give you another easy example. In 1302, it was dogmatic that you had to believe in the temporal supremacy of the Roman bishop to be saved. Do you know what this refers to? That the Pope is not just a spiritual head of all the world, he's also a temporal world ruler and magistrate, a civil magistrate. And Boniface made this a dogmatic statement in 1302 that you will be damned if you don't also accept the temporal authority. Now, post-Vatican II, the Roman Catholic Church no longer teaches this. In fact, all of their documents about religious liberty, all the things that you find in Dignitatis Humanae and the other document, they teach freedom of conscience, freedom of worship, all of the things that the pre-Vatican II popes had condemned. So, Mirari vos, quanta cura, lamentabili san, pacendi dominici gratius, those are some examples of the syllabus of errors. All the things condemned in the syllabus of errors, that's as late as Pius IX, the Pope of Vatican I. All of that is reversed at Vatican II. Prior to Vatican II, only a couple decades prior, because of the dangers of the interfaith ecumenist movement, Pius XI in 1928 wrote a famous encyclical called Mortalium Animos. And in Mortalium Animos, he outright condemns all interfaith gatherings as apostasy. There it is right there. These interfaith gatherings, according to him, are a surrendering of the faith. It is clear that the Apostolic See cannot take part on any terms in these assemblies, nor is it lawful for Catholics to support the ecumenist interfaith works, because it would give rise to a false Christianity. So you understand, it is an apostasy, according to Mortalium Animos, to have interfaith gatherings, and the papacy cannot support it on any terms. Vatican II reverses this in an outright 100% contradiction, and doesn't just make the interfaith gatherings amongst so-called Christian groups, Protestants, Anglicans, whatever. Vatican II goes even further and makes it an interreligious gathering. And that's what happens at the 2 Assisi gatherings, where John Paul II gets all the world religions together in a world prayer meeting. A world prayer meeting to what? To all your respective deities. So 1928 condemns all ecumenism right here. And within a few decades, suddenly ecumenism is the work of the Holy Spirit. What I say about a lot of the people who choose Roman Catholicism in these settings is that you get what you choose. So here is my talk from a while back, How Vatican I Refutes Roman Catholicism and the Papacy, right there. Here is another talk about how Vatican I and the papacy are themselves contradictions. And I'm going to give you another one about showing that Vatican II, you have to believe it. Roman Catholics lie and tell these tall tales that, oh, you don't have to actually believe Vatican II. You can hand wave it. It doesn't count, you see. Now, anything that the papacy confirms, as you just saw, for the entire church from the apostolic chair, you got to believe it. And really, it doesn't matter whether it's ex cathedra, whether it's universal ordinary magisterium, because you still have to submit to the ordinary teaching, even when it's not infallible, as Canon 752 says. Because they've chosen something for whatever reasons. I don't know what the reasons are. Various weird, dumb reasons. Maybe because the papal church loves Skittles now. Maybe it's a Skittles thing. I don't know. You see this talk here? If you go to the description of this talk, you will see the links to the 6 places in Catholic dogma that you have to accept Vatican II. So you see there's no outs here. There's no way for these people. There's no place for them to run. You don't even get to interpret Vatican II. Vatican II is what the papacy tells you it is. Now, what's the source of all this again? In 1090, when the papacy schismed from the Orthodox Church, something radical happened in the Latin West. The Pope decided that he was also, on the basis of the forgery known as the Donation of Constantine, a world ruler. And not only was he a world ruler, he also made it dogmatic that in order to be saved, you must submit to and believe in his worldly temporal authority. The Roman Catholic Church no longer teaches this. In fact, the Pope took off his triple crown. He doesn't wear a 3-tiered papal tiara triple crown anymore because it signified his triple authority, including his earthly Quisatz Haderach, king of the world status. I'm not kidding when I say that. And if you read what Dictatus Papae initially says, the claims are preposterous. They're outlandish and ridiculous. And you don't see any of these claims in the first 1,000 years of Christianity because it's an evolution, it's a development. So in 1090, Pope Gregory VII mandates Dictatus Papae, that the Pope is a world ruler. By 1302, Boniface VIII dogmatizes it in Unum Sanctum and even says that you have to believe it to be saved. In post-Vatican II, the Roman Catholic Church teaches freedom of conscience, freedom of worship, the dignity of the human being, and no one should be forced to believe this or that. The exact night and day opposite of this position. Now, there are many more contradictions in Roman Catholic dogma. I'm just giving you some of the easy basics to disprove this stuff.